everyone, and welcome back once again to the YouTube audiobook series for The Snake and the Rose. I am Abby Matthies, and I will be reading Chapter 2 today. If you missed Chapter 1, I would highly suggest going back to my last video, link in the description. But if you are all caught up, I hope you enjoyed Chapter 2, The Touch of a Hand.
I watched Abby as she swiftly layered the different kinds of makeup on her face. She had contour, eyeshadow, primer, foundation, etc. laying out on her desk. She used the contour to bring out her cheekbones and jawline. She outlined the sides of her nose to make it appear bigger than what it was. She placed the wig that she pulled out of her desk on top of her head. Looking at the results so far, she was turning herself into a man and was starting to pull it off. If she were to go out in public, she could have catfished everyone she met.
Oh shit! I gotta change my clothes.
She said abruptly as she started to reach for the bottom of her shirt. Before I could see any skin, I turned away. I knew she couldn't see me and I could have been a total perv, but I didn't like the thought of that. First of all, I was married. Even though I was technically dead, I was still devoted to my wife and chose to stay devoted. And second, this was a kid. If I would have watched, this would have brought a whole new meaning to Peeping Tom. I stayed turned away until I heard the sound of makeup tools clinking together again. I turned back around to find Abby in a whole new outfit. She wore black formal pants with a white button-up long-sleeve shirt that was tucked into the pants. As I looked at the shirt, I noticed that there were red stains that were blotched all over the right side. I couldn't make out what the stains were from. I just knew that they were there. Seeing Abby as a whole absolutely confused me. Why was she putting in so much effort to look like a man? And why was she wearing that shirt? I continued watching her as she began to grab a small see-through container that had what looked like black face paint in it. I moved in closer, peering over her shoulder to see exactly what she was doing. She opened it and proceeded to dab a few drops of water onto it. She grabbed a disposable mascara brush and dipped it into the paint. She evenly covered the brush and began to wipe it on her face near her jawline. I watched as she continued this process until she formed what looked to be a painted sideburn that formed a beard chop. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Was this really what she wanted to be? Was Abby secretly transgender? I don't know. But I knew that I would find out the answer over time. After she finished with the one sideburn, she stopped to talk to herself for a minute.
I should start getting into character. I better turn on a good song to hype myself up.
She stuck out her hand as she started to rotate herself and faced me. Before I had the chance to step back, I felt her hand touching my arm. I looked back to see that she grabbed just above my elbow. Panic started to rise in my chest as my body froze in place. My mind was submerged in terror. She was physically touching me. If she couldn't see me, why could she feel me? I looked at her to see a concerned and scared face staring at where her arm was placed. She pulled away from my arm and started to examine her hand. As she started to mumble some words under her breath, she fainted. Her body hit the floor as I was now standing there horror-struck. What was I supposed to do? I didn't know she was able to touch me. I was with her roaming the room and she never noticed I was there. How could this be happening? I looked at Abby to see that she was still breathing. I could see her stomach rising and falling as she now laid on the floor. I just didn't understand what happened to her. Did she faint because of the shock or did something else happen? If there is one thing I knew about the demon world, it was that anything could happen. For all I knew, she could be under some sort of sleeping spell that I didn't know about. And if she was, I didn't know how to reverse it. As my emotions started rising and my mind began to race, I felt lightheaded and feeble. Within a span of a few seconds, I too fell to the ground and began to black out. Later on, I began to wake back up on the floor. I took in my surroundings again to see that I was still in the same room that I was teleported in earlier. I started to sit up and my vision suddenly became blurry. I started to rub my eyes to try and counteract the blurriness. My head began to pound from the impact of the fall. In reaction to that, I lifted my hand to the side of my head to feel for a bump. As I did so, I felt my hair in between my fingers. I noticed that it didn't feel like my normal hair and felt coarse and untamed. It was still around the same length, but it seemed off to me. I lifted my other hand, laid it on the other side of my head, and it felt the same way. I couldn't figure out why my hair felt different. There was a possibility of it being like that because of the stress I have already encountered today, not to mention the pretty bad fall I just had. So I decided to brush the idea away. I closed my eyes and slowly pulled my arms back down from my head. I placed them on my legs while I was taking a few deep breaths. As I opened my eyes back up, my sight landed on my hands. I didn't have to examine them for very long before I became conscious that something was truly wrong. When I looked upon my hands, I seen that they were a tan skin tone rather than my normal red. The feeling of dread started spreading throughout my entire body. I began to breathe even harder. There was no way I could be human again. It was physically impossible. I rapidly sprang to my feet and rushed to the mirror that was hanging on the door. As I came upon the mirror, I saw the reflection and became befuddled. I was staring at Abby as she stood in the mirror gazing back at me. I looked into her eyes and saw that they were the exact same eye color as mine were. I moved closer to her to get a better look at her, and she moved towards me as well. Her expression looked just as confused as I was. I cocked my head to the left, and she did the same. I stuck my hand out like I was about to touch her, and she copied the motion. We almost touched our fingertips together. I hesitated for a minute, then pulled my arm back and watched in amazement as she kept up her charade. What in the fuck was she doing? Why would she be playing a game of copycat with me? As I was thinking, I seen her copying my expression on my face. Curious on how long she was gonna keep this up, I started to take my hands and touch my body. I started with placing my hand on the side of my face and watched her intently. She placed her hand on her face and kept it there as I did. After a little bit, I then proceeded downward and ran both of my hands down to my chest. I wanted to test the boundaries that she had to see how comfortable she was with herself. As my hands got to my chest, I was expecting to feel my hard, muscular pecs. Instead, I felt two small lumps that were soft to the touch. I started to feel them in disbelief as Abby continued to imitate me. At this point, I panicked so badly that I shot my hand down to my crotch. My hand fell flat on it. Subsequently, I suddenly became aware of what was really going on. I wasn't looking at Abby. I was Abby. Somehow I was in control of her body. I was the one wearing the red-stained white shirt and black pants. I had all the makeup on my face and looked like someone else. I started to breathe heavily. I began to feel pain in my chest, but I didn't know why. I fell and hit my head, not my chest. It didn't hurt a few seconds ago, so why did it hurt now? I took my hand and laid it to my chest. I started to feel a rhythm hitting against it, and I started to understand why I was in pain. My heart was beating. I mean, her heart was beating. Really fast, as a matter of fact. The amount of force I felt from the beating made me think about someone smacking on a bass drum. I kept trying to think about what to do, but all I could think about was the throbbing in my ears that started to occur from the booming heartbeat. I forced myself to close my eyes and breathe. I started the breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth technique to try and calm myself down. After about 2 minutes of that, I collected myself enough to open my eyes and confront the mirror again. As I looked at my face, I spotted one feature that remained the same. My eyes. The eyes that I was looking at were the yellowish green color that I obtained years ago. It wasn't Abby's brown eyes. As for the rest of me, everything was different. Another thought started to dawn on me. I wasn't a male anymore. I was technically a female at this point if I was in her body. The thought of that obviously disturbed the hell out of me, but I couldn't do anything about it now. I didn't even know how I got in this situation. So Darius, how are you I heard Satan say, as if he was right behind me. I turned around to reassure myself that he wasn't there, but when I did, he actually was. You, I said aloud, questioning his presence. He then began to laugh his evil laugh, the one where it lets his victim know that he is enjoying their confusion and making a mockery of them. Quit your laughing! This isn't funny! What the fuck happened to me? I screamed with agitation as he began to collect himself. He started trying to form a sentence. The only thing that came out, though, were muttered words and chuckles that I couldn't understand, no matter how hard I tried to. Fixation began to overwhelm me. At that moment, I noticed that I felt double the amount of anger than usual. I knew I got angry very easily by Satan, but never this bad to the point I felt like I was gonna explode. Hold your horses, little lady. I can see the veins popping out of your arm. Stop before you hurt yourself, he said while pointing to my arm. I tilted my head downward and lifted my forearm. My hand, or her hand technically, was clenched into a fist. The skin started to change to a red color because of how tightly her fingers were curled into her palm. I could clearly see her tendons sticking out along with a couple of small veins. I gaped at this reaction in amazement. I didn't do that intentionally. Hell, I didn't even know I did that. It must have been the body's reaction to my anger. I took back control of my hand and released the tension. I rested my arm to my side and looked up at Satan. Compared to my height now, Satan looked intimidating. He towered over me like a giant. It made me think of a parent looking down on their child. With that thought, it made me ask myself if my son felt the same way towards me. Well, isn't this a fine surprise seeing you like that? Satan spoke finally after a moment of silence. Don't even. You're the one who put me in this situation. Satan started to chuckle again. What the fuck are you wearing? I don't know what the fuck I'm wearing. Just stop. Why am I with this kid? Like I said before, it was by random choice. No one had a choice in the matter. Well then explain this, hotshot. What the hell happened? Why am I suddenly in this girl's body? All protector demons have the power to switch with their child through the power of the touch. She touched you, you switched. I can switch with her? Why would I want to live her life? Why would I want to be in her body? A female body. And if this switching thing happened every time we touch, how could we possibly work together? So you're telling me I can never touch her? I questioned. You can still touch her, you dipshit. You're given these powers for a reason. You will eventually gain control of when and how you two switch. It takes time, Darius. I decided to brush off his mean comments and keep them to myself. Well, in that case, how do I switch back? Hold on there, pal. You don't need to switch so fast. You are the first protector demon to be paired with the opposite gender. Don't you want to take her body for a spin ride? Wait, what? What do you mean I am the first? There has to be more like this that you don't know about. Well, there isn't, so get used to it. There was no way this was the first time this happened. He was a liar. He has lied to me since the day I encountered him. So he had to be lying about this, right? Normally when he did lie, he always displayed his sarcasm and cockiness. This time, he didn't have it. He sounded serious and almost concerned. I stood there baffled when Satan interrupted my thoughts. Hello, Earth to Darius. You didn't answer me. You know how annoyed I get when demons don't answer me. I snapped back to attention and asked him to repeat his question. He gave out a loud sigh, and he asked it again. Don't you want to take her body for a spin ride? What do you mean, take her body for a ride? You know, relieve some stress. Relax yourself. Maybe start by unbuttoning that shirt. As he spoke, he then brought his hand to my collar to move the shirt away from my collarbone. I immediately swatted his arm away and backed myself up. What the fuck is wrong with you? No, I don't want to do any of that. This is not my body. This is hers. Now get me out of this, now! I demanded. Satan heaved a sigh. You have always disappointed me. Good. Maybe one day you will regret what you did to me. He stared at me in annoyance and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, I was flown backwards and disoriented. I stabilized myself onto my feet. I looked in front of me and seen Abby was thrown forward and trying to catch her balance. I patted my body down and checked my hands. I was back in my body. Satan actually fucking listened. My attention turned back on Abby as she was inspecting herself.
What the fuck happened?
She spoke aloud. I stepped closer to extend my hand to her. As I was doing so, I abruptly stopped, remembering the chaos that just happened from touching. I couldn't put her or me through that again. I felt like now I had to come clean to her and expose myself. She didn't need to make unneeded doctor visits because of unknown blackouts that were caused by me. A demon that doesn't know what he's doing as a protector demon. I had to talk to her, but I didn't know how. I took a shot in the dark and snapped my fingers. Then, I was randomly transported into her mind. I was still able to see what she saw, but couldn't move anything. I was more like a conscience than a actual being. Maybe this would be a way to talk to her without visibly seeing me. Basing my logic around that idea, I tried to speak to her through the mind. Abby, can you hear me? As I said that, she started looking around, noting that no one was in her room.
What? Who's there? What are you?
She asked, freaking out a little bit. Hey, Abby, it's okay. It's kind of hard to explain, but my name's Darius. I'm here to protect you.
What? No, no, I'm going crazy. This isn't real. This isn't real. But what if I am going crazy?
You're not going crazy. I'm just as shocked about this as you are. I just do not want to scare you right now because of you seeing me. That's why I'm communicating with you like this.
If you're real, then show yourself. Prove to me that I'm not crazy.
She demanded. I felt obligated to do as she asked. She had the right to know if I was going to be stuck with her for a while. I don't think that's a good idea, but okay. I then proceeded to exit her mind to become myself again. As soon as I was done, Abby gasped at the sight of me. We were already standing face to face within a span of a couple hours. She began to drape her hand over her face, hiding her mouth. Surprise, I guess? I said aloud, shrugging my shoulders.
You're a demon.
I know you don't, I said, stuttering just as much as she was. I put my hands up to recollect myself. I need to explain. Just please let me explain. We both stood within the silence we created. We both started to stare at each other, when finally I got the courage to explain what I could to her.
This has been Chapter 2, The Touch of a Hand, from The Snake and the Rose. Tune in to the next video for Chapter 3. Thanks for listening.